It's wonderful to see such a great crowd. Good evening. My name is Ben Dworkin. I am the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics, and on behalf of the Rebovich Institute and Rider University, I want to welcome all of you to tonight's program, An Evening with Ambassador Phil Murphy. To begin, I just want to recognize some of the elected officials who are with us this evening, and I apologize in advance if I miss anybody, but we have with us Mercer County Executive Brian Hughes. Where is he? From the 14th Legislative District, Assemblyman Dan Benson. A newly elected councilman in Delran, Daniel O'Connell. The Middlesex County Clerk, Elaine Flynn. And fresh, the one perhaps we are most excited about, fresh off his win for the Hamilton School Board, a current Rider undergraduate, Chris Scales. Hey. So thank you all, and again, I apologize if I missed anybody. In just a moment, the ambassador will come up to give his remarks. When he is done, we will have some time for Q&A with the audience. Please know that we are recording this for our video library and our website, and therefore everything is on the record. If you have a question at that time, please raise your hand. The ambassador will pick you. But we ask, because we're recording it, we have two students who will be holding wireless microphones. If you get picked, just wait till you get the wireless mic. It will help us with everything that we're trying to record. As is our tradition here at Rider, the first two questions need to come from Rider students. So you students all know who you are. I've been pointing you out. 150 years ago, at the conclusion of the Civil War, Rider University was founded as a business school for returning veterans. It was a time of bitter division in the country, and the Trenton Business College, as we were then called, offered a chance for hope, for a new world of economic opportunity. Those who graduated became the backbone of this state's middle class. All of this makes our guest tonight most appropriate to come here to Rider, for he encompasses much of the same Rider spirit of that era a century and a half later. He is a talented business leader who has served the United States in one of the most challenging diplomatic posts imaginable. He has sponsored philanthropic endeavors that seek to give people hope, and he has just launched New Start New Jersey, a foundation dedicated to expanding the middle class. Those are the values by which Rider was founded and which we continue, and our speaker embodies them today. By bringing him here tonight, we honor him as well as our own legacy 150 years after being founded. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Phil Murphy. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Ben, I'm a huge fan of yours and the Institute. It's great to be here. We met in a frenzy last week in Bergen County, and it's a real thrill to be here. Thank you very much for the honor. I've looked at the legacy of the folks who have spoken before me and those to come, and I'm very humbled to be in that crowd. In absentia, I salute Dr. Rosansky, and in person, many members of the faculty, Vice President of the University, Dean of Students, and others here tonight. In particular, I am thrilled to be with the students, a cohort and a crowd I'm always happy to be with. I won't go through the list of the current elected and formerly elected retired officials, but it's an honor to be with you all here this evening, particularly the new guy on the block down there who just got, that's incredible. So hats off to you, pal. We got to come by and get some advice from you. Again, I'm honored to be with you all. I met David Rebovich, I think it was around the time that I was chairing a pension and healthcare benefits task force for Governor Cody. And I found him to be a singular talent. He was regarded highly by all across the political spectrum and all the various corners of society that he touched. And Ben, I have to say that you've propelled this institute forward in his name to new heights, and I take my hat off to you and your team. The Rebovich Institute, I think, sets the standard and really stands alone in the political discourse in this state. Keep up the great work, buddy. And I also want to wish Rider University an early but nonetheless passion-filled 150th birthday shout-out, as I understand it, next year. This is a university, and there aren't many that get this right, that has both tradition and momentum in the here and now. I'm particularly struck by the quality and the diversity of both the student body and faculty. I also think it's a testament to the notion that we're all measured by the company we keep, that each of Rider on the one hand and Rebovich on the other benefit enormously by their association. I want to speak tonight about policy and politics. And these are both passions that I share with, I suspect, everyone in this room. Frankly, I'm more focused at the moment on policy, but we can't ignore, particularly nationally, the results of last week's election and some of the lessons that my party needs to learn. So first, for a little bit of policy. My wife Tammy and Tammy wanted to be with me tonight, and I have to give a shout out to my friend Brian Hughes because there's a Murphy saga going on, because Brian's brother Michael is with my wife at the 25th anniversary of the New York, New Jersey Baykeeper, speaking on behalf of Al Gore tonight as we speak in Jersey City. And Brian, thank you very much for the honor of your coming down and being with your side of the Murphys, being with my side of the Murphys down here. Tammy and I launched earlier this week a nonpartisan 501c4 social welfare organization called, as Ben said, New Start New Jersey. You can look it up, nsnj.org. I'm very happy and honored tonight that its president is with us, Tim Castano. May want to stand up and take a bow. Tim. Tim has had a busy week, and we're just thrilled that he is running this organization so well. New Start New Jersey is aimed at both strengthening and expanding New Jersey's middle class. And even though we're in its first days, I want to give you a little bit of a taste of what New Start New Jersey is all about. I begin by saying that I'm a firm believer that New Jersey's society and economy are only as strong as our middle class. And that's why when I look at New Jersey today, I believe the formula for getting our economy back on track is clear. Start with the middle class and build out from there. I know this works because I've lived it. I've been fortunate in my life. Growing up, we were middle class, as I said to many folks, on a good day. I worked hard, I got lucky, and when I look back on where I started as a working class kid growing up outside of Boston, I know I didn't get here by myself. I did not have the advantages that our 4 children do. And I should take a quick time out and say that Tammy and I have been together for over 20 years. Our kids, just to give you a sense, are senior in high school, sophomore in high school, 8th grade, and 6th grade. And we live in Middletown in Monmouth County. So they've got advantages, admittedly, that I did not have. But I had the great fortune to grow up in a community that judged itself on whether families like mine could make ends meet and give their kids a fair shot at a better life. There were people out there when I was growing up fighting for middle-class families. That willingness to fight for middle-class families is what once made New Jersey great, and frankly, America great. And it's exactly what we're missing today. Everybody knows we should be doing better. We've seen and heard the struggles of the middle-class families. We can all cite the statistics. But the real story is underneath the statistics and underneath the headlines. It's in the sacrifices and diminished expectations that are becoming a fact of life for New Jersey's middle class. That's the trend that we all collectively need to reverse. We need to get back to the time when New Jersey promised a better life for everyone willing to work for it. A life of security and peace of mind, and the realistic expectation that our children's quality of life would be better than our own. New Start New Jersey was created to lead the search for the kind of policy solutions that can restore the middle class to its rightful place at the center of our state's life. To make the middle class stronger, so people who aspire to be in it can work their way in, and those already in the middle class can be rewarded with greater stability and security. We launched our group at NJIT in Newark on Monday, and NJIT is another example, like Rider, of a fantastic institution of higher education in this state. We were joined by a group of experts and persons of great passion from a cross-section of fields directly involved in the issues confronting New Jersey's middle class, including we had folks from foundations, social services organizations, national advocacy entities, think tanks, and academia. Our group, our panelists on Monday included John Bon Jovi, the chairman of John Bon Jovi Soul Foundation, Cornell Brooks, the president of the NAACP, Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress, Anna Diaz-White, the executive director of 180, Turning Lives Around, and Carl Van Horn, a distinguished professor who many of you know at Rutgers University and the director of the John J. Heldrich Center for Workforce Development. We were also joined, as we are tonight, and I'm humbled by that as well, by a big audience. And it included two of my mentors in life, Governors Tom Kean and Brendan Byrne, both of whom I believe have stood at this podium.
Absolutely.
And I'm honored again to be among them. But before we launched on Monday, we decided that the first step had to be listening to the voices of New Jerseyans to understand their experience, their hopes, and the obstacles to a better life. So 3-ish weeks ago, New Start New Jersey conducted a survey of many hundreds of New Jerseyans. I'd like to share briefly with you what we heard and what they say about the middle class life today. Our hope is, as a friend of mine says, we're in the describe mode at the moment as opposed to yet in the prescribe mode. So our hope is that over the coming months, the results shock our state and all of us into some action. And they should. The first thing that's critical to say is that our poll confirmed that New Jersey is a middle-class state. 3 out of every 4 people identify with the middle class in our state. And they're struggling. Among those who identify as middle class, 2/3 say they are just getting by. About half say it's harder to make ends meet than it was just a year ago, and that they're making sacrifices just to make ends meet. You should also know that those statements regard the middle class. When folks call themselves in the lower middle class, not half, but nearly 3/4 of them say they need to cut back just to make ends meet. So it's no wonder then that we see our middle class struggling. Overwhelmingly, folks say the middle class is getting weaker and that the middle class is less financially secure than a generation ago. And that's an important point that many people who talk about the middle class haven't yet understood. For some time, people have discussed how this generation of parents could be the first to see its children fare worse than they have. But the pain, as it turns out, isn't a generation away. It's happening now. A majority of New Jerseyans already believe that their generation's quality of life is worse than that of their parents. Only among seniors is it common to believe that you've done better than your parents. And they expect the trend to continue. 65% of New Jerseyans believe that their children will grow up worse off than they did. What we're seeing essentially is an erosion of the pillars of middle-class life. Now, New Jerseyans do share a broad consensus of what middle-class life should look like. When we ask folks to rate a list of factors on how necessary each is to their personal idea of what it means to live a middle-class life, the factors most commonly cited as necessary won't surprise you. A secure retirement, no need to worry about the cost of essentials, and a secure job, all of which taken together serve to reassure families from their uncertainty about their economic future. However, while New Jerseyans see these contemporary hallmarks of middle-class life as necessary, they also unfortunately see them slipping out of their reach. So when we ask them how well these same factors describe them currently, personally, a striking gap emerged between what middle-class life should be and what it actually is in their own lives. And it turns out there's a yawning gap between the perception of middle class and the reality of these individuals, or for these individuals. I won't bore you with numbers, but I'll give you one example. I mentioned that a secure retirement is one of those pillars. 68% of our fellow citizens agree with that statement. However, when we said, how do you feel in your own life about the prospect for a secure retirement, only 46% of our fellow citizens felt like that was within their reach. And the gaps across retirement, jobs, cost of essentials was a similar one. It's as though, in a funny way, that folks are watching the rerun of a movie that they used to be in. Or someone said to me today, trying to stay in the middle class is like running uphill while someone is tilting the hill at the same time to make it steeper and steeper. For me at least, one of the more striking data points comes from what's missing from the list of middle class pillars. Again, missing. And that's namely the ability to afford a college education for your children. A generation ago, I believe that most of us would have said that being able to send your kid to college was part of a middle class life. I could guarantee you my folks thought that. One of the core pillars, essentially. But today, even the aspiration of sending their kids to college doesn't make the cut. Never mind the sad reality of how they're going to afford it. So in other words, when I said a minute ago that 68% folks said that a secure retirement was a pillar of middle class life, only 42% said that sending their kid to college was a pillar. And furthermore, only 18% said they could afford it. So for me, that's maybe the most striking piece of data. It didn't make the cut in terms of one of the pillars. And again, for those in the lower middle class, what I've just said, the story is even tougher. My friend Cornell Brooks, who I first met when he was running the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and this is before he was hired to run the NAACP worldwide, introduced me to this concept of ALICE. Have you heard of ALICE? Which is asset limited, income constrained, but employed. ALICE. It's an acronym, a brand that both the United Way in particular, and I believe in New Jersey, Rutgers sort of jointly analyzes. And it's just what it describes. Essentially, it's a group of folks who are one paycheck away from meltdown. And they're employed, by the way. They're doing what they always thought they needed to do to get ahead. And it's still not working. And this notion, particularly for those hanging on by their fingernails to the middle class, that notion describes that cohort. And by the way, it's overwhelmingly, I'm told by the folks at Rutgers and by Cornell, a phenomenon related to single women-led households. So that's narrowing that cohort even more precisely. The hallmarks in some of middle-class life are drifting out of reach for more families than ever before, and something needs to be done to reverse course. In the weeks ahead, Tim and I and our colleagues will be releasing more data from this poll, specifically what New Jerseyans say these trends mean for the state as a whole and what they see as the way forward. We hope very much that their voices drive this conversation toward real solutions. Now, I have to lift us here a little bit. There is positive news in this poll. For me, the most encouraging numbers come from the consensus for how our state can move forward. For instance, there's big agreement on the statement, quote, "A strong middle class is a key to a growing economy." Over 90% of New Jerseyans agree with the statement that, quote, "Without a strong middle class, there's no way that New Jersey can have a strong economy in the years ahead." Over 80% agree that, quote, "We need to build an economy from the middle class out." By no means do we have all or even most of the answers. But we believe there's an emerging collective will to begin addressing the problems. I'm an optimist by nature, and I love this state. It's the place that we chose to bring our 4 kids up in. New Start New Jersey, I promise you, will take a glass half full approach in developing a comprehensive strategy to rebuild the middle class. Our afflictions are man-made, and so are the answers. We all recognize that despite our struggles, New Jersey has extraordinary resources and holds remarkable advantages. We have institutions like these. We have dynamic industries. We're blessed with an indispensable location that no amount of money could buy. Above all, we have exceptional citizens who have skill, a spirit, a fight, particularly on behalf of their kids, that no people can match. It's time to maximize these assets, and we think it's time, hence the name, for a new start. Ben, I don't want to overstate my welcome, but I'd love to have a few words on politics, if I may. I'm leaving the chamber of nonpartisan into speaking to you as a member of the Democratic Party, if I may. I joined my friend Howard Dean as the DNC's, the Democratic National Committee's finance chair in 2006 because of his 50-state strategy, not because of any candidate or any particular election. Additionally, or admittedly, I should say, during my time as finance chair, we won back the House of Representatives in 2006, and we helped get Barack Obama elected president. We raised almost $300 million in my 2.5 years at the DNC. I actually enjoy that. I'm in the vast minority. But for all the controversy around Howard's approach, and there was enormous controversy at the time, of that almost $300 million, only about $17.5 million funded the 50-state strategy. And the payoff was enormous. Last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, marked, in my judgment, the completion of a sad, long migration away from Dean's brilliant strategy. We are right back as a national party to where we were 2002, 2004. The hallmarks of Howard's approach were discipline, common sense, and a focus on the very much unsexy, unglamorous parts of politics that do make the difference. Today, we're back to candidate-itis. As Bill Clinton once said, we fall in love, and they, meaning the Republicans, fall in line. Indeed, much of the 50-state strategy magic was ripped right out of the Republicans' playbook. So as close as I am and we are to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and to many of our leaders, both past, present, and future, this has never been for me about them in particular or about any other candidate. Winning elections is about building a disciplined party operation that is inclusive and that can consistently win a majority of elections over time and through cycles of different natures. I think of a healthy party as a line that you fit through a sine curve. You can't win all the elections. Sometimes you'll have an environment that works more in your favor than others. But the line that you fit through that curve is absolutely unambiguously going in a positive direction. It's like a sports team that more often than not is likely going to be in the playoffs. You can't guarantee they're going to win the title every year, but they're a consistent competitor. And the same thing for me holds true for a political party. So in conclusion, I'd love to give you my 10 commandments of what a strong party looks like, the elements of a strong party infrastructure. For what it's worth. Number one, the bottom of the ballot is just as important as the top of the ballot. I would argue in some cases more so. Two, candidate recruitment is key. And I think you have one of two ways you go. One is the baseball way. Minor leagues, A-level ball, B-level, A, AA, AAA majors, or very surgically finding qualified, race-ready, I would call mid-career candidates. But either way, it has to be done with precision, with goals in mind, and cannot be taken for granted. Thirdly, smart, sophisticated technology has to be at the center of any strategy. I said Howard ripped the pages out of the Republican playbook. As it relates to technology, he ripped a page out and then made it a lot better on our side. I might add to the Republicans' credit, they've done a similar thing to us. And if they haven't caught up, they're catching up. So we stand still on that at our peril. Can I borrow one of these bottles?
There's water right under.
Look at you, Ben. Who's bigger than you, huh? Oh, I love you. We have a very specific personal example recently in New Jersey. I looked at the Bergen County races 6 months ago and made the determination that a contribution, if you will, of a very smart, forward-leaning, think how Barack Obama got elected and then reelected, with absolute precision, modeling operation could form the core of a broader, successful campaign strategy. And this is sophisticated, highly edge-of-the-seat voter targeting. Turns out we were right. We had a big night in Bergen. We didn't win all the races, but the big race there, county executive, was won. I have to say, I am a people person, but inside of me beats a Moneyball nerd. So this part of me, this is Moneyball. We can't make decisions based on our gut. We got to make them based on data. And these modeling shops keep us true to that. Point 4, as good as it feels, you can't just rely on winning with huge margins in blue states, blue cities, blue counties. It feels good the morning after the game. But over time, you will not consistently fit that curve and win the elections you need to win. You need a strategy in addition to continuing to stay sharp and win big blue pockets with several touchdowns. You need a strategy that's patient but focused, which addresses red strongholds. You target races or townships, you recruit candidates, you chip away, you make the other guys defend, because if they're defending there, that's time and money and attention that they can't go on offense elsewhere. And then ultimately, you beat them. That, to me, other than technology, is the essence of Dean's approach. You don't take any red or purple county or state, you don't write any of them off. You make an informed, affirmative decision about your strategy. Number 5, we are a party of diversity. Every vote counts, and the candidates and the political team that you field must match, engage, be consistent, be a mirror held up to the electorate that you're targeting. Now, the 50-state strategy was essentially hiring 4 from the National Party operatives to go into each of the 50-state strategies. And that's how you do the math in terms of how much it costs per year. I remember one state, I believe it was Texas, when Howard became chair, he said, we're going to hire 4 folks. And the state party came back with 4 guys who looked like me in Texas. And Howard said, you know what, that's not how it's going to work. Are you looking at Texas in the 1960s? Or are you looking at Texas in the 2010s and beyond? And that burden stays upon us today. I would say I love all the folks I'm meeting around New Jersey, but there are too many guys who look like me who control the scene in the state. I would say separately and apart, vigilance on access to voting must remain a core focus of our party. We cannot take any of that for granted, and that's largely not just a political notion, it's also very much a legal day in and day out notion. Next, we must speak to citizens' hopes and fears and aspirations, and don't try to dump all ours upon them. The message needs to lean in. We need to have courage. We can't hide behind polls. Our noses, I think, tend to get too pressed against the glass and we lose perspective. A victim, in my opinion, of the 24/7 news cycle or the minute-to-minute measurement. I'm a huge freedom of the press guy, but if the measurement is 1 minute to the next, inevitably your nose is pressed against the glass. You lose perspective. I thought about that and how the president played out in this midterm election when I was reading a newspaper yesterday and read the following quote from the Financial Times. And I quote, "Mr. Obama is offering something different. The universal values that have underpinned U.S. soft power for most of the modern age. For all the talk of America's decline and Mr. Obama's domestic political woes, the U.S. and its president retain an appeal to much of the world that China's leaders could only dream of. Period. End of quote." I think we forget what we've got going for us too often, particularly in the press of an election. My 7th commandment is a litmus test that my friends over the years have been sick of hearing, and that is this. What does your state or county or city or national party operation look like the morning after the election, regardless of whether or not you won on Tuesday night or lost? You with me? Do you have people coming to business, coming to the office at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning? If the answer is no, then you don't have a party. You had an election. You don't have a party. Don't confuse that. If the answer is yes, then you've got a party. And I think it's that simple. Commandment 8, lumpy fundraising is bad at many levels. It comes and goes. It scares other money away. A laziness creeps in. It's proven the broader the financial base, the more likely the political base will broaden, and vice versa. Now, there are moments, and I've done it myself, when at the right moment in time, a significant investment, can serve as an accelerant to tip an election. And again, I said investment for a reason. You can't spill money. You are bound to be disappointed. You've got to take the time to read the polls, understand the crosstabs, really study it like you were buying a house or you were buying something, a television. You really have to take your time to understand what you're doing. But at the right time, you can make a difference. But for the most part, disperse broadly sourced funding is far more desirable. Commandment number 9, I suspect I've got agreement with some of you out there. The fallout from recent campaign finance reform is disastrous. It's all of the above. It's lack of transparency. It's undue influence. And it's, I think, worse, a hollowing out of the official party institutions. We've developed, as a result of these reforms, armies of parallel, or groups of parallel armies. And I think the end result is bad for democracy. And finally, very specific to my party, we need a new mindset and a new strategy at all of the national committees. The DNC, the DSCC, the DCCC, the DGA, the DLCC. Our legislative body deficit around the country is shocking at the moment. And that's where a lot of, as you all know, between the legislatures and the State House, that's where a lot of redistricting. So not only where a lot of governing happens, it has huge national, federal implications. Admittedly, there's less relevance in all of this for New Jersey. I would say with 2 exceptions. One is my comment that I've already made, that I sure would love to see more women and more diversity among our leaders. And then secondly, the Dean 50 state lessons that we can apply to red counties, where I have been spending a lot of time. And indeed, I had a dinner with my wife last night with a group of folks in a red county talking about this very topic. For those places, the slow, steady build is essential to get from red to purple. Focus is essential. In places like that, you cannot be all things to all people at once. And frequently, it is building out your township strengths before you take that leap and say, you know what, I think we can grab at a freeholder race or a countywide race of some sort. Sort of getting that pyramid firmly built feels to me at least the right first step. And I have to say, in all of that, saying no is essential. In particular, where we're trying to claw back in a red county or a red state, you've got to have the courage to say no. You've got to make sure at all costs you avoid being an inch deep and a mile wide. So, we've talked a little policy, how the middle class is struggling, but also how the middle class is at the heart of this state's future. And we talked a little bit of politics, how we need to be smart, how we need to be bold, how we need to focus, not just on winning elections or the next election, but on building a durable party infrastructure. Ben, I'm happy to take any questions about anything, including Ukraine, Germany, Russia, but I believe I've just spoken every word I know about policy or politics. Thank you very much. Okay? I'm good.
Okay, so we have DJ and Nina here, so raise your hand First two from Rider students. Mr. Ambassador, just pick.
I'm all set. I just got to say a shout out to DJ and Nina who met me at the front door, have been incredibly gracious to me. Thank you, folks. Yay. Sir, go Giants. They can use all the help they can get.
Yeah, you're telling me. Hi, I'm Ross Stammer. I'm a senior here. I'm a political science and global studies double major with minor economics. You mentioned.
Where are you from?
Voorhees, New Jersey.
Good for you.
Thanks. Thanks. At Rivervale originally. That's why I'm a Giants fan.
All right.
Yeah.
I just asked your question. You're all set now.
All right. Perfect. Murphy's ninth commandment had to do with campaign reform.
Yes.
How would you reform it? How would you go about making it more democratic, trying to stop private persons from basically controlling who gets elected?
I'd do several things. First of all, if I could, I'd repeal Citizens United. So I'd eliminate that, and I'm not sure with this Supreme Court that's possible, to be frank with you, but that's in a perfect world. I always thought whatever you could do to incent small dollar was the best, because I said in my comments that a broader financial base means a broader political base, and vice versa. So I would roll back Citizens United. I'd require complete transparency. Now, I was on Wall Street. If you want to trace back all of Wall Street's issues, and it's maddening, it's typically the lack of transparency. I'd say the same thing about campaign finance reform. So I would roll that back. I would demand transparency on all monies, all supporters. I would have decent limits on the national committees, but I would have limits. But the limits are pretty high right now. These limits are beyond most Americans to begin with, so I'm not sure you need to go up. But I'd be open to anything that sort of shut down things that were outside of the traditional party operations. New Jersey's done very well on pay-to-play. The federal government has done well on pay-to-play, but a lot of these monies exist outside of all those laws, and that is unacceptable. Those are a few things I'd be thinking about. Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Winnie McIntosh. I'm a senior here, double majoring in English and political science, since I'm like right here. I'm actually from Ormond Beach, Florida.
Good for you.
Well, I live there now.
How did Rick Scott win re-election?
I have no idea. It's because I didn't get my absentee ballot.
Could have.
I know.
Could be
Don't
on your
look at me. So I wanted to go back to what you mentioned about the middle class and how the changing perceptions of what the middle class is. I thought that was valuable. So I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the rhetoric that you find when it comes to discussions about the middle class. We're not just talking about like the middle class, we're talking about the lower middle class, we're talking about upper middle class. And oftentimes I've found that's people who are even near the poverty line, who still identify with the middle class, or you'll find people with 6-figure, 7-figure jobs who don't consider themselves wealthy. They still consider themselves part of the middle class. And there is, of course, a degree of relativism, but depending on where you live, what your family looks like. But I just wanted to know if you find that kind of widespread in that rhetoric, do you find that it makes it difficult to zero in on exactly what you need to do strategy-wise to strengthen the middle class?
I've got a few friends here. We had this very discussion. What is the middle class? How do you define it? And some of the benchmarks we use don't work. John Bon Jovi said on Monday that, I think he said the poverty line in Monmouth County was $24,000. But the cost for a family of four, the cost of living for a family of four is $75,000. Yeah, how does that? Yeah. And he said Monmouth County because that's where he and I and our families live. I mentioned this concept of Alice, which is a frightening concept for me because this is someone who's employed, putting aside all the tragedy associated with those who have lost jobs and can't get reemployment for whatever reason. So I think the answer is yes. I think we may. One of the things we talked about this week is sharpening our parameters or putting in starker relief what we mean, what we're talking about. I have to say our discussion on Monday, which was a good one, sort of was largely focused at the group that I think you and I might associate with the lower middle class. And I think we have to sort of face up to that and sort of define it more crisply. It's a very fair point. Sir.
10 Commandments, something we could all live by.
What's your name?
David Riley. I'm a senior here at Rider University. I'm an economics major, math minor.
From where?
I'm from Pennsylvania, so I guess I don't really have much of a say here, but like to speak anyway.
What part of Pennsylvania?
Bucks County, from
Good for you.
Southampton, 30 minutes away. But my question was more ranging for your nonprofit. Congratulations on that, by the way, for New Start New Jersey. Largely considered the economic engine, the fourth largest economic engine in New Jersey is the state lottery. Now, does your nonprofit have a stance on state lotteries? I mean, it's largely, I guess, some people can consider it a tax on the poor. How would you characterize it?
I honestly don't have a position on it, but Dave Russo is the former treasurer of the state. Dave, how do you react to that? My good friend.
It's the fourth largest revenue in the state.
Yeah. Dave agrees with your fact set.
There are issues about they've been raised during the last 20, 30 years, 40 years of the lottery about whether it is exactly what you said. If it is
Yep.
a progressive tax on people playing it, maybe should be playing it, but it's here now. We rely on it. I don't think it's going to go away.
That's a fair question, though. Thank you, David, for that. Sorry to put you on the spot. It's a fair question. And just because it's been around forever doesn't mean we shouldn't question that, right? Thank you. Do you want to stay with students or broaden it out? Let's stay.
Wherever you wanna go.
A couple more students and then we'll broaden out, sir. Is that all right? How about right here, sir? 1, 2.
Hi, my name is David Kimball. I'm from Mount Holly, New Jersey. I have a question for you about
What
education.
year are you?
I'm here. I'm a junior at I'm a junior here at Rider University. I'm a political science and history majors.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. And also a small business owner as well. I have a question about education. You know, we actually been talking about in Dworkin's class how today in urban politics, how education is what strengthens the middle class. And my question to you, since you're thinking about running for governor, is that would you consider moving a town's responsibility of supplying a thorough and efficient education and have the 21 counties instead as the 535 municipalities, as it has proposed many times in the Assembly, in order to have a fair shot for lower and middle class kids and to have an equal opportunity?
So this is like the Virginia model, the Commonwealth of Virginia,
Exactly.
right? May I say easily said, a little bit harder to do?
I agree. Because of home rule.
Yeah, there's got to be, there has to be a way, I say as a private citizen, there has to be a way where we can be more efficient in the delivery of all of our services, most importantly education. And I'm open-minded, and I recognize with 600 and something districts, in 535 municipalities, but there are more districts. Yeah, so either way, it's a lot, more than 21. I'd be open to any amount of good discussion about how to save and how to cut down on overlaps, et cetera. You tell me, folks, is there a big momentum to get to a 21 county system? My gut tells me it's hard. But that doesn't mean you can't be smart about cutting some inefficiencies, sharing resources. It's being done in certain areas. Seems to me we should be able to do more. Thank you. Sir.
Thank you very much for coming to Rider University this night. We do appreciate it.
Nice to meet you earlier.
My name is Lee Clark, and I'm actually a master's candidate here at Rider University, so I'm a little older, but it's fine. My question actually revolves around the middle class. What do you believe are some of the critical areas in New Jersey that state government should be focusing on regarding investing money and resources in order to supercharge the state's middle class and thus promoting a more healthy economy?
Training and education. So more access to training that fits 21st century jobs. I spent a bunch of years in Germany. The Germans do this really well. We do it in certain pockets around the state, particularly in the technical schools. And some of the assemblymen I think will support that. Some of the community colleges, technical schools do a really good job. I think we need to put more support under those and better access. You know, one of the things that we've been studying in New Start, New Jersey is, Oregon offers free community college. Now that costs money. And in a very challenging budget environment, I understand that we have to make tough choices. But boy, that's a game changer in the middle class economy. So those are my two: technical education and apprenticeship and training, and better access in particular, if I had to pick one area, to community colleges. Sir. I assume you're a veteran.
Yes, I am. My name is August Scotto. I have a question.
By the way, big week for you.
Thank you. I have a question. Like you brought up, the middle income people are in trouble. I say it's more than the middle income people. Like, for instance, unconstitutionally, the president has been spending money that is not his ability to spend. He's $17 trillion in debt. That there's going to come back, and everybody's going to get hurt, and especially young people, because they will have to go into a world where they will not be able to make a living because the president has done this. And you got to get after him and stop him from spending other people's money. And if they take it away from the rich, where do they go for jobs? The rich have jobs. And without the rich, you'll have no jobs. You got to, everybody's protected in the Constitution.
Yep. So you and I are probably not going to agree on that point, but I respect your opinion, your position. A lot of that debt got rung up before he got there. We also it did. It did. I hate. It was still a lot, and he had to deal with the second biggest. He had to deal with the second biggest economic crisis of the past 100 years, and he actually didn't start it, sir. He didn't, sir. But that's okay. God bless you. Thank you for your service. You and I aren't going to agree on that one. Back here, sir.
I'd like to return to Citizens United.
Could you give me a name?
Yeah, Rich Balsley. I'm from Hunterdon County.
Nice to meet you.
And I grew up in upstate New York, but I've been here for 50 years, so I have a New Jersey cred.
You
Served on the school
count.
board for 9 years. But 50 years ago, I was recommending public financing of election, and people laughed at me.
Yeah.
And they're still laughing. But the fact of the matter is, when you spoke to it earlier, I think it might be missing by one thing.
Yep.
The Supreme Court is the only way it's going to get done.
Yep.
Constitutional amendment, no chance whatsoever.
I agree.
But so therefore, we've got to elect people who are going to appoint that key person on the Supreme Court that will tip the balance.
Yep.
That was my focus throughout this election. Unfortunately, it didn't work so well.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to do that. Any time wasted on trying to get an amendment passed is a joke.
Yeah. I don't know if you all heard that, but I agree with the point on the constitutional amendment. I don't see the likelihood of that in our lifetime. I'm an optimist, but I'm not foolish. And I agree with you. The Supreme Court is essential. And that obviously, these elections matter, but what really matters obviously for that is the election of the president year in and year out. And in public finance, I'm not sure the gentleman who asked me about this question about what would you do if you had a magic wand on campaign finance reform, that'd have to be on the list. Has to be on the list for consideration. I appreciate that. Sir, congratulations, by the way.
I'm Dan O'Connell, and as you know, I'm from Delran, New Jersey.
Well done.
Thank you for coming here tonight. In all the post-election analysis, in talking about the red wave and all that, I was struck by the fact that it wasn't discussed or pointed out very much about the historic low turnout of voters. And talking with friends and colleagues, we talked about how do you engage in New Jersey, roughly 2/3 of the electorate didn't vote.
Yep.
I wonder if you have any comments, ideas, or suggestions on that regard.
I'll tell you, I'm as upset about it as you are. What party are you in, sir? You're Democrat. So, am I right in saying it was the lowest turnout in New Jersey's history for a however you define it? And nationally, our party had very tough turnout. And people will say, yes, gosh, you can't blame it just on turnout. There are lots of other factors at play, and I'm sure that's true, but turnout's one of them. When Germans used to ask me how to understand the political system in America, I said, listen, there are really two systems that exist, and you might think of them as parallel worlds, but they're both in our system. One is the national election, and the other are congressional districts, principally. And I'm stopping there. I could go below, or I could go lower on the ballot. It's part and parcel of all the commandments that I think on our party that we've walked away from. I think we got soft on targeting. We got really soft on the unsexy, unglamorous things, on registration, on doing the door knocking, on the stuff that nobody, you don't get on the 11 o'clock news doing the stuff that you have to do. It's the really basic blocking and tackling. And I think we get away from it. This notion that Clinton said, which is so true, we fall in love, they fall in line. So here we are now, we're talking about who's running for president. And that sort of drowns all of the other stuff that we should be talking about and should be doing. And I'm optimistic, by the way, for our party for the presidential election. But I just hope we learn the lessons in that we've sort of rebuilt the foundation to some degree so that that election takes place on top of that. I'm as frustrated as you are. My gut tells me it's a summation of a lot of things. There's no one piece that went away, that fell down. And again, congratulations and gesundheit. Ma'am, and then Yuki.
Hi, my name is Annie Snyder, and I'm from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And I wanted to know if you have any initiatives on urban education.
Well, initiatives, I'm head over heels in love with it. We kicked off our entity at NJIT in Newark for a reason. It was not an accident. They weren't the only shop that agreed to host us. I mentioned earlier the notion of technical training and better access. That's a statement you could make about all of New Jersey, but it certainly is most pressing in the urban centers. If you go down to younger kids, New Jersey's always a state that if you look at the broad averages, the median experience, the mean experience education-wise for a student in this state is among the best in the country. The dispersion is among the worst. I hearken back to the Kerner Commission. I'm not sure how many of you remember the Kerner Commission, which is who was the governor of Ohio, who I think ultimately did time for something that was unrelated to this, but it was not related to my example. But he was charged with doing a post-mortem on the riots in the late 1960s, largely in urban centers, and he had this famous phrase which kicked off the Kerner Commission report: "We live in two Americas." And I would just say, we can leave for some other time what magic wand we can wave to solve that notion. We continue to live in two Americas, and in particular, as measured through the eyes of the public educational experience, and in particular for those kids in an inner city urban environment. Yuki. College classmate, I haven't seen her 35 years till tonight, 35 and a half years.
Yes, nice to see you, Phil.
You
I won't show you the picture from 35 years ago either.
I was going to say, you look the same. I do not.
So I'd like to take the question offshore to the fact you mentioned about Germany. You were the ambassador to Germany, and I wanted to ask, and certainly at the depth of the economic crisis, so I wanted to ask, to what extent did you and the president seek to influence a much more conservative German government to take the long-term view of promoting economic recovery rather than imposing financial austerity on Europe's Mediterranean countries? And then a follow-up to that, did you have better success in winning common agreement on political issues?
Great question. The answer is on the former every single day. And it's amazing, we talk about so many things with the benefit of hindsight. So I was getting trained up to go overseas and represent our country in the summer of 2009. And by the way, I'm a former banker, so I'm not someone who would be blind to a discussion about financial market crisis, sovereign debt crisis. That would be something, as opposed to sort of NATO strategic alignment for the 21st century, which I knew nothing about. Somebody said there was a banking crisis, you would think that I would hear that. Not a peep. Not one word was being spoken. You can look it up in newspapers. Sovereign debt crisis was not being discussed in the summer of 2009. It was the end of 2009 into 2010, and it became my life. And we just come from two different schools of thought. We believe, and I know my friend here will disagree, but we believe at least this administration does, and at the end of the Bush administration also behaved this way, that when the roof is falling in, when the house is on fire, you got to jump faster, stronger, higher, throw more at it. Counterintuitively, the more you throw at it, the more you ultimately spend. That's the school of thought we come from. We sort of operate, broadly speaking, under the Paul Krugman star. The Germans, and in fairness, they've got a history that underpins their beliefs on this. They've been to hell and back, and in some cases caused it, but economically, they lived through extraordinarily challenging periods, dictated more often than not by hyperinflation. So if you sort of said, by the way, our central bank has dual mandates, right? Price control and full employment. They don't have the latter. So they are, and that's also the European Central Bank. So the Bundesbank, they're worried about inflation, period, full stop. They also believe Merkel, who I have enormous regard for, Wolfgang Schäuble, the finance minister, they believe in what they say. This is not, folks, this is not voodoo economics. These are people who believe you lower your debts like this gentleman believes, you cut your deficits, you get your house in order, and then from that, virtuous things happen. And our response is, listen, theoretically, that's right, but when the house is on fire and private households have pulled back and companies have pulled back, the only entity left that can lean in is the government. And that's a tough, that probably, if I were there today, we'd still be having that discussion, because unfortunately, the euro got a little bit more stable, and now it's started to slip again. And the worry in Europe is not inflation, it's deflation. That's probably honestly our worry as well. We have it, thank goodness, let's hope it stays that way, far less acutely than the Europeans do. Politically, but again, even when we're disagreeing, I have to say Merkel is among, I'll bet you if you gave George W. Bush truth serum, and then the next day you gave Barack Obama truth serum, they'd each say that she was the most reliable ally they had in the world. And she's become particularly important to us with Putin. And if we start talking about Putin, I won't get off the stage, so we should probably skip that. As it relates to political discussions, we broadly agree with Germany. So the answer is overwhelmingly yes. We'd love to see them lean forward more on a security basis. And they do, and they're on a steady progress toward that. But that's a constant discussion. We have a Germany, by the way, that we asked for. We helped them get back on their feet in the late 1940s, and we made sure the capital was never going to be industrially and militarily strong, and Berlin isn't, that the army would always be a citizen's army, that the industrial base would be dispersed, that they would be very cautious. They became a member of NATO in the 50s, but they'd be very cautious in deployment of their security assets. And they've grown and grown and grown, and they're very reliable, but would always love to see them a little bit more leaning out over their skis. And again, lastly, on the Russian-Ukraine piece, they are the indispensable player, and she personally is.
We have time for one more question.
Oh, I feel badly. How about something on the way back? How about, Ben, if I let both of these folks go, and I promise I'll give one answer that doesn't last, two answers that doesn't last more than one.
Hi, my name is Kenny Dillon. I'm an undeclared freshman here. I'm from the Bronx in New York.
Hello, Kenny.
My question also regards the middle class, and even with your middle class upbringing, considering the 2+ decades you spent with Goldman Sachs and your current economic standpoint, what is your response going to be like to voters who think that you can't relate to the middle class anymore?
Great question. Sir, want to do both at the same time?
Hi, I'm Adam Saber. I'm a senior here. I'm studying German and biology.
Where are you from?
I'm from Toms River. I did plan on speaking in German, but I'll keep it in English. I know they're recording it.
We're going to have a test when this is over.
So I am studying German. I read that you were the former ambassador. I am seeking to get into translation, and I wondered if you could give me any hints or any tips along the way.
Can we do that? Can I do it afterward?
Yeah.
I'm going to warn you right now, I think I'm going to disappoint you.
Oh, yeah.
But I would bet Washington is a place. Actually, I'll do it right in front of everyone else. We're gonna give you some career advice right in front of everybody. Washington, German embassy. Secondly, some of the big German multinationals that operate in New Jersey or New York, but there's a lot of the BASF. Thirdly, I know Monmouth County has a German school. Is Brian still here? Does Mercer County have a German school, as anyone know? And they are good at both educating people and placing people. Not bad?
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. Great question about the middle class.
Can you relate?
Yeah, can you relate? Listen, I've never left the middle class. I made a few bucks. I don't live in the same house I grew up in. I was the youngest of 4. But I'm still a middle class guy. I'm still both theoretically and practically a middle class guy. So in terms of the way we're trying to bring our kids up, you know, my wife's staying up all night last night with our kid who's got 102 fever. That's a challenge that any mom or dad faces, no matter what you are or where you're from. We're trying to instill responsibility, civic responsibility, bring kids up, God bless them, and hopefully we're doing it the right way. There's no manual that I've read that necessarily lets you paint by numbers. But in the way I've always lived my life, and I live it as we speak, I'm a middle class guy. The soul that beats inside of me is from Newton, Massachusetts, 73 Jassett Street. As a theoretical matter, I'm going to take the Phil Murphy hat off. As a theoretical matter, how do you jumpstart an economy? You do it from the middle class out. This notion, this failed notion, time and again failed notion, that if we treat the folks up there really well, we'll benefit from that somehow. It doesn't work. The only way that works, in the way I'd love you to think about this, is as the middle class goes, so goes the whole society. And that's the star that I was born under in terms of the theoretical part of me. But in the first part, I've never left. I promise you that. But in the more sort of how do we fix the state, that's how you fix the state. And just for my buddy who asked me about the translation job, I will say, instead of thank you in English and thank you for listening to me, I will say vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Ladies, one second. I just want to thank the ambassador. It was a wonderful evening. I'm sure he's going to take a long time to get to the door, so if you want to grab him again, now's your chance. We look forward to you coming. Our next event will be December 3rd. Adam Geller, Chris Christie's pollster, is going to be coming. So if you want to hear about what our governor might be thinking the country, where the country is heading, let's go listen to his pollster. So I encourage you all to come out on December 3rd. And please note, it's inside your program, on March 6th, we are having our biannual Rebovich Gala. This is our biggest opportunity to raise the money to give our students scholarships so that they can do these unpaid internships in politics and government that are so critical to anybody's future in this business. We hope you'll be able to be supportive of us over the course of the year. Please have a safe trip driving home. Thank you very much.